Okay. So today's practice, as far as injuries or being out, nothing. So that's a good thing. And then we will have the pads on today. Like I said yesterday, we're gonna switch that up, get the pads on, and get going with that. So that should be good for the guys. It was nice to have that walkthrough yesterday and get them back. And now we'll get out there today and get those pads on. So that's all I have.
Matt, obviously Saturday night, last audition for all these guys. Are there a couple positions where you have to really pay closer attention because the competition is that tight that even you guys aren't so sure?
Yeah, I'd say there's a few. Without getting into too many details, just with other opponents, but we have a couple positions right now that we're looking at that we're keeping an eye on, and even some of that is more depth too, and not so much the starting stuff. But I always look forward to this one because sometimes you get that one, you get that one player that maybe there might be from coaches a little doubt in, and then all of a sudden they prove you wrong, right, in this game. And whether even sometimes that's a practice squad player that catches your eye. And so that to me is something that's important as well. I know, we have a lot of talk about Justin and the quarterback position and everything, but these other guys that are fighting for depth and fighting to make this roster, this is a really huge game for them.
Is it literally so close that what they do on the field Saturday night will dictate their?
Sometimes, yeah. Like if it's that close, and you feel like, hey, this. And I told the team that on Friday night of last week at the hotel. I told them, when you really break it down, right? If you look at the numbers, you're looking at about 190 plays in the preseason. If you're somebody that plays every game with 3 preseason games. Of those 190, you probably play a third of those. So you're looking at probably 80 to 90 plays that you get to play in the preseason. Of those 80 to 90, is there 3 or 4 plays in there where you catch a coach's attention or eyes or your teammates' attention? And so now you take that, you cut it down to one game, and you're talking, it could be a play or two that someone really jumps out at you, and yeah, that is the difference. That's if it's close.
Yeah, with Peters on Saturday, if all systems are go after what you see Saturday, will he still be in shape to go an entire regular season NFL game in week 1? Or are you trying to determine that by what he does?
Yeah, we're not going to determine it by Saturday. We're going to see where he's at to give us a gauge to where he's at, so that the rest of the time as we go preparing for the Rams, those whatever it is, 17, 16 days, that's where he's going to have to continue every day to work on his conditioning and game shape. So we'll get a good feel of what he feels like when he's out there and how that goes. And we're going to rely on him. He's a guy that's played a lot of games, and he can tell us, okay, percent-wise, this is where I'm at. And then we just got to be prepared heading into that game where he's at and how much he can go or not go.
So as unorthodox as it might be, could that be a rotation situation in a regular season game, or do you want one or the other,
Well, you would love to have one or the other, but we're prepared if it is rotational. We have to be prepared for that.
Matt, to what you were just talking about a moment ago, can you think over your time in the league of examples of guys that, may not have been on your radar, then caught your eye and all of a sudden had a different window of opportunity open?
Probably more so than somebody that came in my experience in Kansas City that I remember that I didn't know much about was Albert Wilson, who came in OTAs and then came in the preseason, and he kind of, as a undrafted free agent, he showed us some things that was impressive, caught our eye, and he ended up being a starter for us. And just seeing him the other day when Miami was here, I got to talk to him and stuff, but he's a guy that jumps out that I remember specifically the preseason being really big too. And then, there's probably a handful more guys that as well. I can think specifically, you think of a guy like Thomas Ives, right? So Thomas, his rookie year, came in here in that 4th preseason game. You go back and look at the numbers, he caught some people's eyes in that game. And he ended up staying with us here for several years. And so there's another example here.
Have you gained like a heightened appreciation for the urgency that the guys who play in this game have? And for some of these guys, it's potentially the last time they ever play football.
Yeah, I have. And because that's real, too. I mean, what's the number of the hundreds of players that are about to have that unfortunate handshake and not know what their future is? And so we always talk to our starters when guys don't play or when they're on the sideline. Let's look sharp. Let's be supportive. Be coaches out there for them. These are some of the biggest job interviews that these guys will ever have in their entire life. So let's respect that. Coaches, let's understand that as well. So that's really big to me. That's big to our coaches. That's big to Ryan. And we take it very seriously.
And obviously the practice squads stayed the expanded size this year. Do you imagine there might be more movement on cut day in the couple of days after than there was last year? It seemed like last year everybody was maybe not content, but happy enough with the guys they've had that they knew were healthy, that it just took so long with the virus intake and all of that. Do you think there?
I think you could see more movement this year than last year because of what you just said. And then probably by team, the depth of where teams are, do they feel comfortable of where they're at? You know, teams that need more are going to probably have more movement. Teams that don't, or if there's a specific spot on your roster that you need something, you could see that if it's generated. But for the most part, I would say probably a little bit more this year.
Do you have a better sense of what you need because there have been preseason games than you did
Yes.
this time last year?
Yes.
Knowing that you have until a couple days after the final preseason game, how are you all preparing for that scramble to have to cut so many spots in such a short period of time?
Well, fortunately, they're working through all that right now. Meaning personnel, Ryan and his guys. So they're all over that. They're in here all day and night, going through possible roster cuts of other teams. So for us as a coaching staff, we're more focused on evaluating the players in the game, and then they come to us. And when you do have the roster cut downs like we've had the last 2 weeks, you know, you're talking 10 less guys that you have to deal with or cut on the 53-man roster cut down day. So it's not as bad that way. So it's a little bit more helpful to them. But for as coaches, then we wait and they come to us and say, hey, we might have this guy or that guy pop on the tape real quick and look, or they just do it.
A new wrinkle in this preseason is now you'll play this final game and then have a week next week to practice, but you also have cuts are in the middle of that.
Yeah.
So how do you treat next week? What are you going to do with next
Yeah,
week?
so Jason, this is the first time I've talked to a couple other coaches in the league, and this is the first time that we're all going through this. Without me asking them what they're doing, I think we're all in the same flavor as you have to be cognizant of the players that are still on your roster going into that Monday, and then Tuesday you have practice squad guys that aren't in the building, so you have to manipulate your schedule to know you don't have a lot of guys. So we're going to really focus on strength and conditioning for next week. We'll still have some practice. It'll be mental. We're going to grind them lifting weights. We're going to grind them conditioning-wise, stretching with our pillar stretch, mentally work on stuff, and then have a couple practices sprinkled in there. But it's different. We've never had this before.
Yeah, I have a question for you too about, excuse me for a second. Rodney Adams, tell me if this is a naive question. He's been very productive, obviously, but do you also take into account any of the non-football with him in the sense that everything he's persevered through might tell you something about how he's going to approach the job going forward?
For sure. I think you know about his story, and then even up to recently, how he's handled himself with having the baby, not having much sleep, but yet sacrificing time to practice and play. And I respect that about him. He's somebody that works hard. He's very coachable with Coach Furry and trying to be better. He's a great teammate. He eats his lunch every day at the same table at the same time. So he does that. He's consistent with that. But he's a good kid. He really is, and I think his story speaks to who he is as a player. He's persevered, he's resilient, and as a coach, you love those type of players.
Matt, this is going to be the first time you're going to be traveling. So how is it going to be different or similar to last year? And I know you have the numbers with the players you still on your roster, but
Yeah.
what do you see is going to be different or not?
So probably the biggest thing will be the whole vaccinated versus unvaccinated and where the unvaccinated have to sit on the plane. And we have not, I know Ryan's working on all that right now, and once we get through today, I'll be able to be more involved in how that's going to go and where that is. But the players will be great with that. They'll understand it. And, last year we were so thankful when we were able to even eat on the plane because you didn't have to have your mask on and you could eat, and then we would get yelled at if your mask wasn't on and you weren't eating, which is good. But it's going to be different that way, which is good. It'll be back to somewhat normal for those that aren't or that are fully vaccinated.
What's it going to be like to enforce two different sets of rules once you get to the hotel?
Yeah.
I mean, is that, and who's in charge of that? Is that a Dre thing? Is that a you thing?
It's all of us. It's Andre, it's Ryan, it's myself, it's everybody. And again, you get to a point even like with us here in Chicago, right? When you're downtown, the rules are different, and everyone has masks on in Chicago. So, whatever their rules are and how that goes, but communicate. just make sure guys understand how real it is. And then we gotta hold them to that. We all gotta do it, whether we're fully vaccinated and you gotta wear a mask, you gotta wear a mask. Whatever the rules are, just follow the rules.
When you were talking about the arrangement on the plane, are you saying that you have to keep the unvaccinated players together?
The unvaccinated players together, yes.
Coach, when you think back to like the beginning of camp and what you were hoping to get out of this particular training camp, then you factor in the variables of health and individual production. How would you evaluate this training camp as a whole for your football team?
So far, pretty good. I like mentally where we're at. I thought the guys, you always wonder coming into this thing, what's the player's mindset's going to be? Is it a feel sorry for myself camp? This wasn't. The last couple, that's why actually yesterday, because of the health of some of our guys and where we were, they grinded through 2 good days after that last preseason game. They came through and they really put through some good effort, which I appreciated, and I wanted to let them know that I appreciated it by flipping yesterday and today. But overall, it's been a very focused, business-like approach to where we're at. I think that we've had a good balance in most areas of the callousness that we look for to get them tougher, but be smart and not get to the point where you get guys hurt. So so far we're there. And again, like just juggling that balance of probably more specifically offensively with some of those wide receivers and the timing with Andy of trying to see where that's at. And, in the preseason stuff for those first couple quarters is probably the biggest thing where you'd like to maybe get just a few more reps with them, but it didn't. And it was more about balance of injury, which is, pretty, for me, it was something that I just wanted to make sure that we protected.
Matt, in years past, you've used the week before week 1 to kind of branch your starters off and start preparing for the regular season opener.
Yeah.
What can you do next week to start doing Rams prep? I know you talked about strength and conditioning, but what's the plan for Rams prep?
Yeah, it'll be tons of meetings. It'll be a lot of walkthroughs depending on where they're at physically. We want to be smart there. We gotta make sure that whatever we're doing is conditioning, because you can't lose that conditioning, because they also after that week they get 3 days off. Right, and then they come in for a 10-10-10 on that Monday, and then they get Tuesday off again. So conditioning's big, like stay in shape, be conditioned, mental. But then there's always this. It always happens. Is you have that extra week, and you hear some coaches talk about prepping for the Super Bowl, and they talk about what? Putting in too much stuff, right? So you have to be careful of everything you do is so crazy on putting so much in that you just it's paralysis by analysis. There's a balance of that too. So we want to make sure we're cognizant of that and focus on us too, not just the Rams.
Game planning be fully underway next week?
Yeah.
You talked about injury risk. Where does that come into account when you're trying to figure out what plays to call for Justin, what plays to have on Saturday? Because, you guys are almost to the end of the game.
Yeah, I know. There's some of that involved, and to be completely honest with you, there's some of that in there, and we got to know who's in there and who he's playing with and all that. There's the evaluation part too, but we feel good about where Justin is and how he's played, the amount of snaps he's gotten, and that's where, like, for us as all coaches, it's always you get to a point where this third preseason game has never been done before where there's 3, right? There's always been a recipe, and it's always been sit your guys in the 4th game, let your starters sit. Well, now I think you're going to probably see half the coaches are going to play their starters for a quarter and a half. The other half are going to pull their guys and no one's going to play. But then what's going to happen in week 1 is the teams that win, every one of them are going to be geniuses because they sat their guys or because they didn't play, because they played their guys because they look good. So that's just how it goes. But we want to go out and play hard and have fun.
Is that real wood?
Huh?
Is that real wood?
Yeah, I think so.
Thank you.